This podcast contains strong language and adult themes.
Date Night China explores life and love for better relationships in China. Every week, we hear from different guests and dive into dating, relationships, mental health, and how both expats and Chinese people connect with each other here in China.
Join the Date Night community through our podcast and events in Beijing and Shanghai, and catch up on all the latest stories on our official WeChat account.
Find our account on WeChat by searching Date Night China, no spaces, no capital letters. You can also join our WeChat group by adding Rachel, me, on WeChat. You can search Rachel Weiss 22, RACHEL WEISS 22.
And now for this week's episode. This week, episode 26, we have guest Rachel George, licensed therapist and life coach with Heart and Mind Coaching. Based in Beijing, she's very active in the community here, hosting a variety of wellness challenges and activities. She also joined us for our event that we ran in January earlier this year.
No, it was January.
Oh, was it?
I think it was like last year, 2021.
Oh, was it last year?
Oh
my word.
Mind, Body, Soul
event. Wow.
With a few different speakers. Rachel was one of them. Xiao Jie, who you've also heard on the podcast.
Yep.
As well as Angel, who does a fitness community.
Indeed.
It was really wonderful. But I've known Rachel for a while. You moved to Beijing. I guess we're going to hear more about that, but you've been part of the community, and I see you always popping up in WeChat groups, writing articles, running community challenges. I think you're just very involved with the community here in Beijing, and so really excited to hear from you today, because we are going to be asking you for advice about the question we frequently get from people in China. Why is dating in China so damn hard? So with Date Night China, we've done so many surveys, we've heard so many responses about online dating burnout, about just loneliness and disconnect, and expat transience. So many things that kind of combine into creating a different environment for dating here in China. So Rachel's joining us today to impart some wisdom on us that will hopefully give a more positive outlook and maybe a different perspective or some thoughts to reflect on for your own personal life. So welcome, Rachel George. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here. It's so good to see both of you again. Yeah, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago that we did Heart and Soul, but it was amazing and just super, super stoked to be here to answer that. Why is dating so hard in China? Let's if we get the answer to this question, we're golden, right?
And you've got just one simple, you can sum it up in a paragraph, right? You can just, that's what easy answers. That's what our audience is looking for.
Easy, super easy. Yeah, let's see how that goes. No pressure.
So tell us a little about yourself first, where you're from, how long have you been in China, and how long have you been working as a therapist, and also what is your relationship status?
Love it. So this is my 5th year in Beijing, and I came straight from Houston, Texas to China. Had never been here before, was in a relationship with my guy who was also here in China, and just kind of was like, okay, one day I was like, I'm going to China. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah, I got a job and I'm going to China. So that's what brought me here. I've been a therapist going on 18 years now. I know I look so young and fresh, but 18 years in the game, and started my life as a teacher and absolutely loved it, and was just always curious about why students were behaving in a certain way. I was more curious about the behavior, which led me to being a therapist and currently working in an international school in middle school, and love it, right? Just love it. Teaching was my heart and soul and passion. So getting to be in a schoolhouse every day is just what I was put here to do and help people, right? Love the question about my relationship status, though. I love that question. So
do you?
I would say, yeah, I do. No, I do. I think it's great. So because I'm like, okay, I don't even know how to answer that question. So I was in a relationship 10 years, and this year he needed to stay back in America and be a dad. And love for us has never really been about attachment. It's been about allowing each of us to be happy in the space and place and time. And so this is my first real year. My first year I was here, but we were traveling back and forth, right? So we saw each other every 3 months, and then he came the second year, and this time things are a little different. So we're just kind of allowing each other and setting each other up for success and just kind of allowing us to see where life takes us. I mean, he's family, he's my guy, he's always going to be that guy, but it's kind of like I'm free, right? It's like, okay, let's just see what this experience is about. So I think, like, to say, what's my relationship status? I mean, I guess I'll be dating in China, I guess. I don't know. I think that's where my relationship status is at the moment, right? So this was very timely. I thought it was pretty funny.
Interesting, like you said, having time with him and being here, and now he's not here. Like, it's just an interesting change and a different season of life for you. So I hope it's going
Total.
well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's exciting, on one end, and it's, like, super scary at the other because 'cause I'm not really even sure that I know how to date. Like, how do you do that after you've, been in a relationship? But we've always been, like, super open and free and, and just, like, kind of allowed ourselves to have time and space to talk to other people, not necessarily date other people, though. So, I don't know, it's exciting, to be honest, and then it's also kind of like, how do you focus really more on our friendship and kind of like, the foundation of who we are, as together and who we are as individuals. So it's exciting. Let's see what happens.
Like a whole other episode on its own, because so many couples
Probably.
just trying to navigate that. Oh well, one of us needs to go back, and what do we do, and
Yeah.
how do we sustain it? How do we help each other, like you say, set each other up for success? It's and so many couples have got different approaches. I mean, we've known so many people already take different mindsets about that. So yeah, maybe that's another episode.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. It was a conversation and a decision that came out of lots of conversations, and it was kind of like, I love you, you love me. That's not going to change, but I don't want either one of us sitting around and being worried and concerned about what's going on in our respective lives, right? Like, it's too much stress to put on each other. It's like, no, like, it's okay. This happened in this time and space for a reason. Who you are to me and who I am to him is not going to change. So let's just be happy and focus on who we are as friends, and I think that that's what's most important. Yeah, but it is difficult.
And like, wise way to approach things and coming with a lot of love and care, though, and
Mm,
knowing that
mm.
communication, which I think maybe ties into what we're talking about today, and you can impart some of your wisdom about dating. But just to start off, like, dating can be challenging in China and any country you're in, but I think, like we said, it can be very unique experience here. From your experiences listening to people in China and maybe now your own experiences that you've been dating, why do you think dating in China is so difficult?
I mean, I hear it all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, like, "Ugh, there's no men here, there's no women here, I can't find anyone, like, dating life sucks." I've had friends that have left China, in order to just say, "Okay, like, I want to be in a relationship and I'm not finding anyone here," so they've made the decision to leave, and I'm just kind of like, "I'm out all the time, and I see people all the time, so, like, what's the deal?" Like, I don't understand. So I think it just kind of goes back to, like, what is it really that you're looking for, right? And I think the whole idea of dating, like, there's such, like, a heaviness and an expectation that goes along with that word, where really, like, if we're just vibing or looking for someone to connect with and we take that pressure off just a little bit, I think it would kind of allow us to, like, drop our shoulders and recognize that connections are meaningful, right? But I think China's difficult. This expat bubble thing, it's so small. I mean, it's kind of like we're all living in a super small town trying not to, like, date our cousins or something. I don't know. Like, it's super, super,
100%
super
true.
Oh
small.
wow.
That's so true.
It's so true. It's like, oh my gosh, like, okay, who's your mama, who's your daddy type of situation, right? Like, we go to the same bars, we drink the same drinks, I mean, it's just we see each other, we're on the same group chat. So it's like been there, done that type of thing. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. And most of the
It's
time
just to
we're in this
hide.
yeah, like, come on. It's like somebody knows who you've been with, right? Somebody knows your story. I don't know. Um, and then we go to the same places all the time. It's like you go to, like, your standard, like, okay, I go here, I go there. So we're not really meeting some of the other people who go over there. right? So we have like this pattern of consistency, and we're not really branching out of our own little social networks, which really would expand your opportunities. So I think that's one of the reasons why dating in China is so hard. The other reason is this whole uncertainty. I think we talked about it a little bit. It's just nobody really knows what's going on and what we're doing. Like, are you staying? Are you going? And so we've got this level of uncertainty just within ourselves, which makes it really difficult to attach ourselves, quote unquote, to another person, because it's like, okay, we're kind of like hesitating, right? I think researchers are calling it hesitating now. So it's just, we're kind of like, all right, like, okay, like I like you, this is great, but are you going to be here in 3 months? Like, what's your China story? How long are you going to be here? So all of that just makes it super difficult.
Hesitating. I've never heard that before.
Oh,
Hesitating.
oh, I missed.
Hesitating.
I missed that. Sorry.
A little pun there. I've never
Hesitating,
heard that
yeah.
before. It totally makes sense, though. We do get comments from people all the time about, you know, expat transients, how people have different expiration dates in China.
Well, actually, so much so that now, like, I've got a rule where if anybody mentions transients or transient, then usually I have a drink in my hand and I have to drink. And by the end of it, I'm pretty sauced. You know,
it's a phrase that we say a lot because I think it's very true for many people, and people aren't
Absolutely.
sure, like, where are you at now, especially with COVID, and especially how the world looks now. Like, it's very
I
uncertain.
mean, yeah, it's like a complete, like, just we're uncertain about pretty much everything, right? And so then we're just kind of frantically looking for different situations that we can control, you know? And then we become desperate. And it's just like this big old cycle, where we're looking for something, but we're not really sure what we're looking for. Is what we're looking for going to be here? Am I even going to be here? I mean, it just makes it super difficult to commit when we can't even really commit to ourselves or think about where we might want to be. So, you know, there we go. And I also think that the whole great thing about COVID, I do believe that there's some fantastic things that have come out of COVID. But one of the things is that people have like super turned inward, and worked so much on themselves. I mean, like self-care and going to the gym. Like, I mean, have you been to therapy is like the new sexy pickup line. I mean, that is like, you know, I mean, like, forget anything else. It's like, have you been to therapy? Are you working with a life coach? Like, that's super sexy. So I think we've turned inward, and so our preferences and our values and like what we're looking for has changed a lot, and we've gotten really better at that self-care, and had growth there. So, you know, that also changes things a little bit. The way that we date is going to be different because of that.
Described well what the kind of landscape feels like with COVID, the uncertainty, the expat bubbles, and why it's so hard. And we've actually pulled a few specific scenarios as well from China Daters. One of the surveys that we did talking about online dating burnout and why dating is so difficult. So we'll share a few of these quotes with you from people who have interesting experiences dating. So one of the challenges a lot of people have said is loneliness and disconnect. So somebody said, once in a while, when loneliness creeps up, I would venture onto the apps, hoping to meet somebody that I could spend quality time with. But more often than not, it goes nowhere, and I'm left feeling empty by the experience. Then for a month or two, I would actively avoid the apps. I used to delete them when this happened, but I've learned that I'll probably just end up going back at some point, and then having to go for login details, it just makes it a hassle. So now I keep them on my phone and I just ignore them. How do you feel about that, Rach?
I mean, you know, here's the thing, like, no one wants to be lonely, right? You know, like Drake even has a line. Sorry, guys, I love Drake. Drake even has a line in one of his songs that he's like, no one wants to be 70 and alone, right? So that sense of belonging and connection is just one of our greatest needs. We're not designed to be alone, so to speak, but it's really about what you believe alone to be. So perhaps like, because loneliness is conditional, it's a conditional state, right? It's going to come, it's going to go. So if maybe shifting your mindset from I'm looking for someone to spend quality time with, which has a sense of intimacy. We need to build a sense of intimacy and trust before we start spending quality time with someone. That's kind of deep, right? But instead of looking for that, which will come eventually, how about it be like you're looking for someone just to connect with, to chat with, to talk with, to experience some new things with, right? So perhaps it's more of like shifting the mindset, because if we're just jumping into I'm looking for someone to spend quality time with, that's going to lead us to some disappointment, right? We can build up to the quality time. And quality time might not even be someone's love language. Like, I mean, that's probably a whole nother episode too, but quality time and what does that look like for you, right? Quality time for me looks completely different than I'm sure quality time looks like for the two of you, right? I don't need to see you every day. I barely want to see myself every day. So like texting me is quality time, but some people need to spend time in the same room. So like, what does that look like? So I think it's about really looking at what your expectations and what your definition of not only loneliness is, but quality time might be. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Actually, like earlier this year, I don't want to go into too much detail, I guess, but like, you know, I've had a few, I'm thinking of one friendship that had to just take some cooling period because our definitions of quality time or like being friends and like trying to connect was just completely different, and where they're at and where I'm at just wasn't working. It was just built. It was just causing friction every moment, every sort of moment of connection. And then eventually, it was like recently, you know, I had to, you know, send my friend a message and say, you know, I think we need to part ways because this is not working. Like I'm in a different stage, and you're in a different stage, and I just don't think, you know, I can live up to your standard, and it was just too difficult to sustain. And you know, maybe when I was younger, I might have entertained it, or it might have just gone on, or I might have ghosted the relationship in a weird way. But now I'm just like, you know what, I need to nip this in the bud, and we need to call it what it is. And it's time.
Yeah. And you know, that's the thing about friendship as adults, right? Like, I mean, when we were younger, like you could just be like, "Hey, do you want to play?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." And then everything was cool. But when we're adults, it becomes like it's another level of intention that comes into space, right? And then it's like putting in more time and effort and spending time on purpose and being able to communicate what I'm able to give you as a friend in this time and space and what you're able to give as a friend in time and space. Are we able to accept that, right? And understanding that like our friendships are going to change. Like we've got all kinds of stuff going on as an adult. So like how can we be more curious about what everyone has going on and be more open and put some air into that friendship and releasing the expectations that might have come along whenever we were younger. So I see that happens often in adult friendships. It's like you're expecting too much of what I'm not able to give. And there might have been some needs that weren't expressed on both of your parts, you know what I mean? Or some feelings that weren't expressed on both of your parts, looking back at it. But that's where just you hold each other accountable and, you know, have those conversations. But thanks for sharing that. Like that's a common thing.
Okay about it now. It was difficult because I talked to Rachel a lot about it. But I feel okay with I think it's the best thing, and you know, I think it's
Yeah.
a mature way to deal with it. Going into it, yeah, I would have gone in completely different, but you know, it is what it is, and maybe that'll change. But for now, it's you know, it's settled with, and I'm happy at that.
That's all right. You had a boundary and you stuck to it and that's it. And good on you for not ghosting. Man, like, ugh, that is so hard. Ghosting really can feel like a death. And I know that that's like super heavy, but it's the truth. Like whenever you just kind of disappear on someone, the other person is just kind of left holding this like, whoa, like what happened? Like this person just disappeared from my life, right? But it's so much easier to ghost because we don't have to deal with it. We don't have to have a conversation. Um, so good on you for taking the mature, these are my boundaries. I'm going to state them road and not ghosting and just saying how you feel.
Hey.
I
Hands
think
in the
you always
air.
do really well with
Yay.
that. Like asserting your boundaries, or you're not afraid of conflict either, or an uncomfortable
No,
conversation,
I
which
don't
is
mind them.
really good. I think that's the part that people feel afraid of. They're like, I don't want an awkward conversation. I don't want an uncomfortable situation or something where
Right.
I'm going to feel like the bad guy because I'm saying something the other person's not going to like hearing. And that can be really
Right.
uncomfortable. Like I don't really like confrontation, and I've had to learn, and I'm still working on it, about how to not shy away from it and like, yeah, assert my boundaries, feel comfortable and confident doing that. Because it's like worse in the long run to not do that.
Right. I mean, it's so difficult. And I think maybe even acknowledging like, man, this sucks and this is a hard conversation for me to have and I am uncomfortable, but like this is something that I need to do for me and I'm hoping that you can understand and maybe we can work from there, right? But it's just ugh, no one really likes it. It's not a fun thing. But then the more you do it, the easier you get at it, you know? So
Let's talk a little bit more about online dating burnout, and a lot of people feeling like it's just incessant swiping and matches never go anywhere. There's no intentionality behind it. What are some challenges with online dating?
So, I mean, hello, like the burnout is real. And I think, like, really, I guess it goes back to that intention, but like, there's so much that you can learn from your chats in the online site. Like, are you having some banter? Like, how are the conversations? Are they going like beyond the like, hey girl, hey, or ooh, you look like that little like frivolous stuff? It's just kind of like, it's okay. And just like really kind of looking like, I did a test, by the way. So I wanted to see like the differences between men and women, how they swipe and things on Tinder, right? It's been very interesting. Like I think sometimes there's some intention where some people just swipe right to everyone and then just kind of see what happens, right? And then some of us are very selective with our swipes. And so I say swipe right more, because you just never know. I think again, if we just take that pressure off and just like see it as a communication and I'm just meeting new people, I'm expanding my circle. I can get it. Yeah, I can figure it out. But I think also like maybe cutting to that date as soon as you can. I mean, because what happens is the more that you chat and the more that time goes on, you like have this fantasy of what this person is going to be in real life. And then it's like, okay, I believe they're going to smell this way. Yes, I've seen their picture, but whatever, like we're going to vibe this way. And then you get to the date and you have these high unrealistic expectations and you're disappointed. So it's like,
True.
within 3 weeks, just cut to the date. Like stop the chat. Let's chat in person.
Good at that. He would like limit. He was like, I need to get to a date in under 10 messages. It wasn't like a hard and fast rule. It was just
Wow.
like, it was just something like, if we're liking each other and there's some good banter, I'm going to immediately move off the app, the dating app, and like, let's make a real plan to meet up. Like, rather than like, let's go on for days on the app and languish over, I don't know, then you don't answer back, you kind of ghost anyway.
Yeah.
So he had this rule. Maybe it wasn't 10 messages, but
It
it
kind of
was.
sounds like what's that movie with Kate Hudson? How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days? It's
Yeah.
like how to get a date in 10 messages. That'd be
I
a great.
love that.
I'm gonna pitch that to Netflix.
Yeah,
That's,
you should.
Yeah, let's do it.
You totally should. I would watch that. I think that's fantastic, right? And I think it's also like swiping outside of your norm. This is probably not good for me to say, but I won't disclose the name of my friends, but I ran 4 of my friends' Tinder accounts for like 4 months. And I would get to them to the point, yeah,
No,
I saw,
no.
yeah.
What?
Man, I am killer. I am killer, man. I am so good. So I would get them to the point where it was like time for them to like, get off the app and be on WeChat. And then I would give them a rundown, of course, of what we talked about, what the vibe was, what I thought. And then there you go. And I will say I've been very successful. And let me tell you why. It's because I was swiping outside of their norm. It was people that they would have never swiped on. And I was just like, you know what? Like, he looks kind of funny or she looks kind of, kind of cheeky. Yep, we're doing this. And bam, there you go. That should be like a side hustle for me. I should run people's Tinder accounts.
So,
Yeah,
Just saying.
please. Yeah, God, that's
swipe for your friends.
Yeah, two Netflix deals. Wow, easy.
Hello.
Okay. We can partner on that one. Please tell me that you had a PPT for your friends. That would be amazing. Like you sit around and you're like, okay, sit down, listen up. There's like a 20-point PPT about the men that you're gonna be seeing.
I mean, you're calling me out. I actually did almost like a Scandal. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Scandal, but like in Scandal where they put the picture up and then they put like all of the different things, kind of like a like an investigative board. Yeah, something kind of like that. It's like, okay, this is his deal. This is what time he usually starts texting. Yeah. I mean, it was great. I will say I got lots of joy out of it. I will say. I
think
used
that's a
some of
great
my
idea,
friends'
though.
verbiage. Yeah, because they wouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? They wouldn't have
And
done it for
especially friends
themselves, and they
you
would have.
trust well and that you know well. Like they're like, hey, you know me
Yes,
well. See what happens, and they're gonna look out for you too. They're not gonna let like bad dates slip
exactly.
in, but they might swipe on people you might
Exactly.
not usually. I think people get stuck
I
in
mean,
boxes as well
exactly.
of what they're looking for or their
Absolutely.
expectations. So that's a great advice.
Hmm.
There you go.
Hmm.
Let your
Hmm.
bestie run your Tinder for a minute and see what happens. There you go.
We got as well was I've had many dates that didn't feel like dates, but it felt more like job interviews. What is my star sign? What are my future goals? What is my blood type? Children? How much money do I make? We just met.
So frustrating, right? So frustrating. I think first and foremost, it's important for us to remember that none of us really know how to do this dating thing right. Like, none of us do. Like, love is natural, dating is not. Like, it just isn't. And so, people are super comfortable at work, super comfortable in a work environment, right? We're very dominated by work culture. So it's kind of like they know how to interview someone, they know how to give feedback, they know how to do what they do there. So they're going into a date with something that they're comfortable with doing, right? And so I think the challenge with that is like own the pivot. Like, communication's a two-way street, right? So if I'm sitting on a date and they're just going through this laundry list of, who are you? How long have you been here? Da, 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 da. Do you want kids? Do you have an animal? It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to recognize that. Like, this is not the direction I want the conversation to go. So, like, own the pivot, like, pivot the conversation whenever someone's coming out with their detailed list. And give the other person some grace. Like, they don't know what they're doing. You don't know what you're doing either. So that's why I always challenge people to go on at least 2 or 3 dates. I say at least three. Some people say two, but the first date is really nothing. It's their representative that's showing up. It's really not them. So like, give them a pass. Go on another date. See what it's all about. The questions could have been their way of like toning down their nervousness.
Devil's advocate, like, isn't a complaint? Say if a guy was doing that, asking all those questions, wouldn't if he wasn't doing that, then or like a lot of women complain about guys just like I've got so many girlfriends that have said, "Oh, he just talked about himself. He didn't ask me one question."
Mm.
But too many questions is just crazy. Okay, so like the
Yeah.
guys, like, if you're getting guys listening to this, like, okay, well, how many fucking questions do I need to ask that doesn't make me sound like a weirdo?
Right? Like, what's the happy medium? Like, I don't understand. Do you want me to ask? You don't want me to ask? Like, what's the deal? Like, we can be so complicated. I think it's again, like, I mean, if you feel like no one is asking you something about yourself, but then at the same time, you're not offering information about yourself, then like, who's holding the bag of shit, right? Like, I mean, who's to blame, I guess, maybe for that. So it's like, if you're in a situation and you feel as though you're not divulging or you're not being asked things about yourself, offer up things about myself, or better yet, call the person out like, hey, man, we've talked about you for like 5 minutes, like, let's talk about me, I'm fantastic, right? Like, just kind of again own the pivot, like pivot it back into the direction that you want it to go. I think sometimes we listening is an art, it's a skill, and oftentimes we listen to respond and not necessarily like listen to understand. And so oftentimes we're just kind of caught up in that kind of vibe, that situation. And it's like, okay, like once there's a natural pause, pivot the conversation. And then also, like I said, remember, we don't know what we're doing. Like, no one really knows how to date, and that's okay. We're doing the best we can. We're going to figure this out together, type of thing. That's a good devil's advocate question. I like that.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the end of part one. We had such a great chat with Rachel George that we decided to split this into two parts.
Yes, so tune back in next week. Rachel will be back again to expand more of her sage wisdom about dating. Next week's episode is going to be talking about the difference between values and preferences when dating, how to have a more positive mindset when it comes to making connections, and also how to like evaluate a date and see how they align with the values that you've reflected on.
And lots of other great nuggets of wisdom and advice in between. So listen in, and thanks a lot for listening to this episode.
Bye!